I've been a fan of the Rayman series for a very long time. Back in my early childhood, I grew up with the Rayman Raving Rabbids games. This was the first time I was introduced to the now iconic character. But little did I know, these games were merely spin-offs of a bigger series which came years before it. And later on in my life, I would finally learn what that main series was all about. Over the years, I would pick up Rayman Origins, Rayman Legends, and I'd eventually go back to play the older 3D games, Rayman 2 and Rayman 3. And yet, after playing so many games in the Rayman franchise, I never got around to playing the first game in the series, that of course being Rayman 1. I didn't grow up with the original PlayStation, so this one was never on my radar for games to check out as a kid. But now that I'm older and more knowledgeable on Rayman, I figured it was time to take a look back at the game which started it all. So, without further delay, this is my review of Rayman 1. The game starts off with an intro cutscene where this magician man explains the plot to us, in an incredibly annoying voice.
Hi, folks! You wanna know what's going on? Let me tell you the story of Rayman!
Anyways, he goes on to explain that the Great Platoon, which holds the balance of the world, has been stolen by the evil Mr. Dark. Strange creatures begin appearing and are locking up the world's powerful Electoons. So, it's up to Rayman to be the hero and save the day. Once making a new profile, we can finally start the game and enter the Dream Forest. And I've gotta say, I'm really impressed with the visuals so far. Everything is super animated and the sprite work is really detailed. Seriously, even visually outstanding games like Yoshi's Island can't even come close to Rayman. And those both came out the same year. It's certainly obvious that this game was ahead of its time. But that's not all for presentation. The music is also very solid. There's a great mix of jungle beats with atmospheric sounds that really give a sense of place to each environment you explore. Now, presentation is one thing, but how does the game actually play? Well, it's pretty decent. As you can probably tell, this is a 2D platformer. You'll be expected to perform precise jumps, and along the way use Rayman's limbless hands to punch enemies. And later on you'll gain more abilities such as holding onto ledges and using his hair as a helicopter glide. It's all pretty neat stuff, even if your moveset does start off pretty scarce. As we move through more levels, the variety remains pretty interesting. Boss fights start being introduced, beginning with the Mosquito. The fight is pretty easy, but progressively bosses get much more difficult. After hitting the Mosquito a few times, he's finally defeated. And as a reward for conquering the first fight, we get to use him as a ride in a small portion of the level. I found this to be a really nice touch. There's also a pretty interesting vertical stage. The water level begins to rise and you're given these quick planting seeds that grow large plants to jump on. I must say there's an impressive amount of creativity in Rayman, which I don't see very often in these kind of side-scrollers. It's really great stuff. These all sound like positive traits of a really great game. Unfortunately, things start to take a turn for the worse in the second world of the game, Bandland. Don't get me wrong, there are still some very fun and clever ideas in this section. Having all the stages constructed out of musical instruments is a brilliant concept, but along this creativity is a difficulty spike, and a pretty shocking one at that. You'll start to encounter some really obnoxious enemy types. This green bug in particular is one of the most annoying creatures I've seen in any video game. They don't initially act very aggressive, but once they get flying, you're pretty much as good as dead. But that's just one example. Spiked blowfish and sharp music notes will start filling the screen and killing you on contact. Take that in with a rampant speed increase from fast-moving platforms, and it really begins to get draining. All of these obstacles will cause you to restart the levels over and over and over again. It just becomes too much after a while. And after that world, the challenge ramps up to insane levels. More dying, more restarting, and less of a reason to get excited for what's to come next. Levels after Banland just become so chaotic you'd swear they started making elaborate death traps instead of levels that a player can actually get through. And once you run out of continues, you gotta restart that painful set of levels all over again. Some of this level design makes you question whether or not the devs even played their own game. And upon doing some research, they didn't. There was no playtesting done on the game before it even came out. So all this annoying enemy placement and all this terrible level design could have been fixed if someone just played the dang game. And I couldn't push myself to get through it. The levels just kept getting worse and more challenging until it was just giving me a headache. So I stopped there and put the game down. The sad thing is, there's still a lot of great things about the original Rayman. Like I already said, the presentation is phenomenal, and so much passion went into creating all these unique levels and cool ideas. But the majority of its strengths just crumble under the massive weight of its difficulty. If only someone was there to tell the developers to tone it down a notch, it would have turned out to be a pretty awesome game, instead of a bit of missed potential. But believe it or not, there is a version of this game that exists, which supposedly fixes all the problems that I have with the original. Not an official product, but something fan-made. Game creator Rayman took it upon himself to recreate the original Rayman with all its strengths, while tweaking and removing the things which didn't work. So instead of giving up and leaving this review unfinished, I'll instead be taking a look at the fan-created game, Rayman Redemption. The best way I can describe Rayman Redemption is that it's essentially the Sonic Mania of the Rayman franchise. In that game, old levels were redesigned and mixed in with new ones for a nostalgic celebration of classic Sonic's history. And most of that holds true for Redemption. It's evident from the start that vast improvements were made here, most obvious of which is the inclusion of widescreen. Not only does it make the game look a lot better on modern screens, but it also helps in a gameplay sense. With a wider screen, you can see a lot more of the level at once, meaning that shocking surprises that lead to your death are much less frequent. Another useful tweak to the design is that you begin the game with nearly all of your power-ups. Instead of having to suffer through many frustrating areas to get the ability to punch, grab a ledge, or glide, it's all there from the start, which eases you into things a lot better than Rayman 1 did. While mentioning player mobility, the controls have been refined for even better movement. The original had a good control setup, but its clunkiness became exceedingly more apparent as the poor level design came to fruition. All these improvements and tweaks make the game a lot more enjoyable. But that's only the surface of what this version has to offer. In addition to making it look and feel a lot better to play, almost every level is modified in some way to elevate the experience. Take the previously hectic and often annoying Banland level for example. In this new version, there's a small on-ground section which not only provides a better setup for transitioning worlds, but also helps the player adjust to the area a lot more. Some of the really tough sections in the original have been changed to be more manageable as well. It just goes to show that a few minor changes to the game can lead to a much better experience. And sometimes, making it a little easier isn't a bad thing either. That said, there are still some sections which bring me back to the feeling of frustration so prevalent in the first. Banland and Blue Mountains aren't too difficult, but when I got into Picture City, I began to get a bit more irritated. While Rising Water wasn't really a problem for me before, when you place it in a side-scrolling level, it really starts to get on your nerves. That's not even mentioning the boss battles. Oh boy, they're hard. If you're stocked up on lives, it likely won't be a problem, but they're structured in a trial and error sort of fashion, where you'll often lose a life just trying to figure out the enemy attack pattern. And if you're low on lives, that means you'll have to restart the whole set of levels again. This definitely makes me think back to the original and how difficult that was. And yet, Rayman Redemption never steeps down to the lows of Rayman 1. Unlike its predecessor, Redemption always has something new to look forward to. Such is the case with the next world, Playtopia. This is no doubt the highlight of the game. Playtopia is a brand new world created from the ground up by Rayman himself. It takes on a theme similar to a children's toy box, with building bricks, wind-up robots, and basketballs building the geometry and obstacles that you'll have to face. There's just so much creativity put into every inch of the 4 levels that it lasts. Heck, there's even a reference to Rayman's extremely obscure math games. With details like that, it's obvious that the creator had a dying passion for the series. There's so much more I could say about Rayman Redemption, but I don't want to spoil it for all those who are interested. So instead, let's get into my concluding thoughts on Rayman 1 and Rayman Redemption. I'm sure it's clear at this point that I did not have a lot of fun with Rayman 1. Although it's got a great aesthetic and so many excellent ideas, it's really the poor level design and severe difficulty that brings the whole experience down. But thanks to Raimani's astounding efforts, this potential won't go half-baked. With so many improvements and changes to the original Rayman's design, Redemption is just a joy to play. Sure, it does have some frustrating moments, but with the new content and an addition of multiple difficulties, that won't even be a problem for some. So yeah, I think it's fair to say that Rayman Redemption is the ideal way to play the first. Not only that, but this is a fully fan-made creation, meaning that it's 100% free to play. If you own a PC, you can play Rayman 1 in its best version for free right now. In fact, I'll leave the link to download this game in the video description if anyone's interested in trying it for themselves. Thank you to everyone for watching my new review. I hope that you're a fan of the new video style, and if you like my content, you can tell me that by leaving a like or a comment on the video. And if you want to keep up to date with the content on the channel, feel free to subscribe if you'd like. This has been PlayTendox, thanks for watching the review, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.